Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, and I'm here with one of my very favorite speakers, Heather Wolf, who is going to be talking about fascinating um, bird feathers and their fascinating functions. I know her slideshow started with fascinating, so that's where my head went. But we're going to be talking about birds, and for some reason, birds are just always popular for us. But also, Heather makes it so accessible, so understandable about what's going on with birds in our lives. So we're going to hear from her in just a minute. But I do want to say thanks to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. We couldn't do it without them. And I'd like to thank Heather for letting us share this program with other libraries because, of course, when libraries work together, we make bird magic. And you know that's a true thing. So you can buy signed books from Heather from Aesop's Fable, our favorite local indie bookstore. I'll send a link to that about that in the recap email I send out to everybody, which will have the video link as well. So if you have to leave early or something like that, you know that we're going to have a recording. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and I'll ask those of Heather at the end. I will be turning the chat off for people during the slides because nobody wants to be distracted by that. So, like I said, Heather is one of my favorite speakers. I think this is her third or fourth session with us, and they're always fascinating. They're always well researched. And last time, Heather actually came up with a topic that she had no idea, well, very little idea of the topic, and she researched it to like the very nth degree, and she gave us the most amazing talk. So this one, I think you have some history with about bird functionings and fascinating information about birds. So hopefully it wasn't as big of a lift for you, Heather.
Well, yeah, you actually came up with that topic last time. It was feather color, and it was amazing. And I knew a little bit about feather functions, but as always, I learned so much preparing for this talk, and I thank you so much for bringing me out of my comfort zone and so that I can learn these things. I feel like almost like an ornithologist. So,
I feel like you are an ornithologist. So yeah, like I said, I'm going to turn off the chat. I'm going to disappear. And if you want to bring your slides up, we'll get started.
great. Thank you so much, Mina, for having me here. I'm gonna, let's see, go ahead and do this. Make sure I have the sound on. We got sound. Okay. Okay, so as Mina mentioned, I'm going to be talking about fascinating feather functions. So if you were here last time when I talked about feather color, there is some overlap. I'm going to touch on a little bit of that, but really we're here to talk about some of the cool functions of feathers. And let's see, let me check. So I did want to share a little photo of a tiny gadwall duckling, and they have these downy feathers. And I ran into a couple that had come on some of my bird walks yesterday in my patch in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And I wanted to share an amazing story that they shared with me when they lived on the 12th floor of a place near Central Park. They had mallard ducklings that were in a nest in a flower pot. And these ducklings would walk along the railing, and one fell 12 stories. And luckily, the doorman brought it back up and rescued it, and it was alive. Now, I think this doesn't always happen, but this is a testament to the fact of not only like the very light and hollow bone structure of these birds, but also the feathers, right? So the feathers probably had something to do with like kind of softening the fall and the impact. So I'm excited that that duckling was saved. So I did want to mention that. And okay, sorry about that. I think my external clicker affected this. But anyway, as we were talking about, we've got the third area I'm going to talk about are wild and crazy feather functions, some things that you might be able to see and some things that you might have to travel to see. And even then they would still be difficult, but they're still cool to know about. I want to mention the asterisk because of this presentation, and there are so many cool things that I wanted to share with you that I didn't have pictures of. There are some photos from other people. So if there's a title of a photo and it has an asterisk, that is a photo taken by another photographer, and you will see a credit next to the photo on the screen. So I want to start off by sharing this awesome slide from Cornell Lab of Ornithology where I work, and it shows the different types of feathers. We've got tail feathers, wing feathers, And then a lot of these feathers that have a lot of wispy aspects to them, the down feathers, contour feathers, semi-plumes, and then in the top right, my favorite, phyllo-plumes and bristles. And you'll discover why these are some of my favorite feathers in this talk. And if you look at this other view, our typical idea of these feathers that kind of have like this zipping kind of feature where you've got barbs that come off of the central rachis, which is the feather shaft basically. Barbs come off the rachis, and then they have these barbules, and the barbules have these little hooklets which lock together to zip the feathers together. And those are these blue portions that you see of the feathers. And as you can see, some of these pinnaceous, as we call them, feathers have plumulaceous sections, which are the more wispy sections that don't zip together. So that gives you a little background on the types of feathers we're going to be talking about. So first of all, we're doing cool feather functions that we've likely seen before or can be easy to see. And I'm going to have you guess at what this feather function is as we watch a pale-billed woodpecker in Oaxaca, Mexico. Okay, pretty cool bird, right? So obviously that bird was using its tail feathers to really stabilize itself as it hopped around this tree. This was a super tall tree in Oaxaca. I hope the bird was okay going down that hole. I don't know what happened to it after that, but it must know what it's doing. But as I said, it was hopping around, really using its tail feathers as a tripod or kickstand to support its movement. But this is also used in foraging because, as we know, a lot of the woodpeckers, they really kind of peck into bark with quite a strong force. And that can be super difficult if you don't have these tail feathers as support. So a prime example is your yellow-bellied sapsucker. A lot of us are familiar with this awesome bird, and you could see here those tail feathers actually are like kind of bent a little bit, and they're flush against the bark. And these tail feathers are the central tail feathers have a very thick rachis, that's that center shaft, and they're very flexible and they have pointy tips. And this facilitates the movement of this bird and lets those tips go into the cracks in uneven bark and things like that, so it can really support itself. So an example of the foraging, a little bit different from what we saw with the pale-billed woodpecker, just kind of doing a Superman thing or a Spider-Man thing around the tree. This is active foraging by a yellow-bellied sapsucker. You could imagine what would happen if it didn't have these supportive tail feathers when it's doing some of this drilling and tapping the sap so that it can maybe come back later and get some insects that have attached to the sap. There's a lot of force there. So you can see it really helps with stabilization. And the downy woodpecker, which is the smallest woodpecker in North America, does the same thing. But the interesting thing about the downy is that it is super small and it can forage on stalks and reeds and things like that. And it's interesting to see how it's almost using its tail to grip around this little stalk here as it forages. Let's take a look. It even kind of used its tail as it leaned the tail against the stalk as it took off in flight. So I'm wondering if that might have been leverage to take off as well. And an interesting thing about the feathers too, you notice they're black, they're dark. If you were at the last talk, you learned that the pigment melanin is in feathers and it makes them very strong. So, you know, the feathers that are darker with the melanin in them, browns and blacks, are much stronger than the lighter feathers. This is why you see on the edges of the wings of gulls and things like that, they're there are darker feathers because this helps with wear and tear. So you've got the northern flicker, which, yes, I know, I hope you had a happy Valentine's Day. There is a heart on the back of the head of a northern flicker, so I had to show you that. But this is a close-up of those tail feathers that serve an amazing function for this bird. There are other birds that also have really reinforced and strong tail feathers. These are a couple of wood creepers I photographed in Colombia. While they don't really kind of bang their head against the bark to forage, they do uh, move all over trees. They're arboreal, so they need to navigate a lot, around the trees, and also they will dig in their bills to extract insects and other snacks from the bark. So the tail serves a very similar function to help them brace as they are foraging. So now I have a question. I wonder how many people have ever seen a bird without a tail. I bet most of you have. I definitely have. And I wanted to show you that if you do see a bird without a tail, that could be a sign that it was being pursued by some kind of a predator, and it may have escaped and survived. So you should really congratulate this bird. There is something called fright molt. So it's a stress-triggered release of feathers. It's involuntary. So the bird can't just say, I'm going to get rid of my feathers. But what happens is if the bird's scared or if it's being predated, it'll just drop the feathers. This sometimes happens when, say, a bird gets caught in someone's house and they rescue the bird and they handle the bird. Sometimes those feathers drop. But the good news is they do grow back. So this is a photo I took of a long-tailed tit in London, and this is a perfect example. While I couldn't find a photo of a bird without a tail, I did find someone else's photo of a bird without a tail, and this is perfect because the long-tailed tit has such a long tail. And here it is in London, and here is the photo of the result of fright molt. Quite a difference there. So pretty fascinating feather function. And next time you see a bird without a tail, you'll know why it doesn't have a tail in most cases. Now, lizards can actually voluntarily drop their tails when they're under threat, and this is called autotomy. And in the case of birds, since it's not voluntary, it's not really true autotomy. But lizards like this northern Italian wall lizard, which I photographed in Queens, believe it or not, can actually drop its tail. So pretty cool. Now, thermoregulation is something that we think of when we think of feathers. They keep birds warm, they keep us warm if we have a down comforter or jacket. But there is something really, really cool related to the thermoregulation and how it all works. So there are many layers of the feathers. Remember, we looked at the diagram of the different types of feathers. And one of the big questions I get, especially with this cold winter, is how in the world are the ducks surviving not only the freezing cold temperatures, but the snow, the cold water, all of this? Well, really, if you look at the snow collecting on this bird's back, on this mallard, that's really a good sign because this snow is not penetrating these, what they call contour feathers. So the contour feathers are kind of like a dry suit that shields from moisture and kind of traps things. So it also repels water. So then there are feathers below that trap air and keep the bird warm, which is kind of like our down comforters and jackets. So if you think of it, it's like a duck. It has this self-maintaining dry suit, which is the outer contour feathers, and that's layered over a down coat. And the down coat includes some semi-plumes, which some of those show in the bird's outer feathers, but below it, there's like those downy, wispy sections, which are the plumulaceous sections. And then below the semi-plumes are the down feathers. So here's another American black duck. This is kind of a wet snow, so that must have been pretty brutal. But here you can see that all of those blue feathers are what is repelling the water. And there's some dispute as to what makes these birds waterproof, right? These birds preen. You've seen when they're maintaining their feathers, and what they're doing is distributing oil a lot of times over their feathers, and that preen oil uh, is thought to, in some respects, waterproof the feathers, but it could just be because it's maintaining the structure of the feathers, which by their very structure can bead the water. So the air basically makes it so that the beads of water and snow don't penetrate those contour feathers. So it may not just be because the contour feathers are oily. It might be because they're conditioned by the preen oil and to maintain their amazing structure that makes them water repellent. And now all of these these plumulaceous feathers, these are what keeps the bird warm beneath that outer dry suit. So that's how it works. And I basically videoed this greater scalp. This was 2 days ago. And just watching this bird float on the water, it looks like a single feather just floating on top of the water, no care in the world, completely dry. It wasn't snowing in this case, but it was a cold day. So it's a really neat way that they use their feathers to keep and stay dry. So now we're going to move into the take a closer look feather functions. These are the ones that we don't see often, or maybe you have seen them, but I want to give you tips for how to keep your eyes peeled for how to experience and witness these feather functions. So I talked about preening and how birds distribute preen oil over their feathers, and that is the most common form of feather maintenance that we see. But there's another really cool one, and it makes use of a type of down feather called powder down. And not all birds have powder down, but herons have it, and pigeons have it, parrots have it, and some others. And basically, feathers are made of keratin, and the powder down breaks into powder, basically like a keratin talc. And this is used as like a dry conditioner by birds. And different species make different use of the powder down for different reasons. So I'd say the one that you want to look out for if you have a lot of herons in your area, and you've probably seen this before, is when herons distribute powder down to remove fish slime and oil, to soak up that stuff, and also to kind of attach to parasites and facilitate when they do preen so that they can remove all of that gunk and parasites. So if you take a look at a heron, you can see some powder down here. I'm going to zoom in and point to these. And a lot of times when you see a heron, you've probably seen white kind of gauzy stuff on their bill, and that is the powder down like you're seeing right here. And then you see a little flake of it. Now, I really want to point out that binoculars are so awesome for witnessing this type of stuff. You want to have binoculars with the proper specs, either 7 by 35 millimeter, 8 by 42, or 10 by 42 are the best. And then you will be able to see a lot of the things I'm going to talk about tonight. Another interesting thing with this powder down is a lot of times these black crowned night herons, their black crown looks a little grayish, right? And that's because of the powder down is muting the color. Now, when these birds, herons, all types of herons do this, green heron, the night herons, even sometimes the great blue herons, when you notice them kind of preening their feathers, zipping their feathers together, all of that stuff, if you stick around, you might get to see a cool display of powder down. And I lucked out with this. So check out what I got to see. So when the bird finishes preening, it will shake, or sometimes it's called rousing also. And what we saw there were little bits of the powder down, but also the actual powder fly out. So let's take one more look at it so you can see it. Keep your eye out on the sides of the bird for the powder that goes off this bird. So definitely something to keep an eye out for. And you may have seen when birds, like when herons, you notice here with the green heron, has a little bit of separation in its breast area, like it was going in there with its bill for some reason. Now we know why, right? We see also there's powder down on its bill. The powder down is often concentrated in beneath the breast feathers of the herons and also on the flanks. So often they'll be kind of digging their bill into that area to get that dry conditioner to move over their feathers. Now, this is really cool. I had tried to get a picture of this, but I wasn't able to. But the herons have a pectinated claw on their middle toe. The claw of the middle toe has a little mini comb. I'm serious. And this helps them to distribute the powder down a little more efficiently into fine little crevices. And it also can kind of pick up parasites as it's moving through the feathers. So when you see these birds scratching, I've seen them scratch for like 2 minutes. So they'll just go on and on. So I did trim this video, but here's an example of the bird using that claw of its middle toe to get rid of some parasites. Yeah, so my new goal with bird photography is to get a photo of a pectinate claw. So hopefully next time I present for you all, I will have that. Parrots also have a lot of powder down. Now, it depends on where the parrots are from and what kind of habitat they're in. So but in parrots, it's often a full body feather protection and maintenance system. They're not spreading it over to soak up fish oil and things like that because that's not what they eat. So, but the parrots that are in desert areas and very dry areas where it's very dusty, the parrots have a lot of powder down to protect their feathers. So they basically have biodust that protects them from dirty dust or environmental dust, which is kind of an interesting way to think about it. But a lot of the parrots that are in the tropics where it's more humid and there's a lot of rain, while they do have powder down, it's not as visible. This is a yellow-eared parrot that I had the pleasure of seeing in Colombia, and you don't notice a lot of powder down on this, although it does have it and does use it as a conditioner. But the other parrots that are used to habitats in deserts or come from those types of habitats, like the African gray parrot, cockatiel. If you've ever had one of these animals as a pet, you probably have experienced the dust. And here's a wildlife educator showing off that example of how dusty this gray parrot is. Pretty wild. And doves and pigeons also use the powder down in the same way to condition their feathers. It's not as dusty as with the parrots, but it's definitely there as a general purpose feather care aid. And it also can help provide a little bit of extra insulation as a layer. Now, with pigeons, unfortunately, sometimes pigeons do crash into windows like a lot of birds, and they often leave wild imprints of this powder down, which I'm going to show you in a second. Here's some arrows pointing to where the powder down is. You can see a little bit of it there. And here is a photo of someone in the UK that had a common wood pigeon, unfortunately, crash into their window. And it doesn't really matter what bird does go into the window. It will often leave somewhat of an imprint because it does have some dust from the environment on it. But for birds with a lot of powder down like this, it's just really prominent, as is the case with this common wood pigeon. So the next type of feather we're going to talk about is, I'd say, probably my favorite, which is the bristle. It's got that rachis and a few barbs down at the bottom. It doesn't always have the barbs at the bottom, but sometimes it does. And this is a type of feather that is often seen around the mouths of a lot of birds. You may have seen this. Here is an eastern phoebe flycatcher. And you see all those bristles, rictal bristles is what they're called, and they are around the mouth. And it used to be thought in the 1980s, before the 1980s, it was thought that these rictal bristles were a way for the birds that were fly catching and things like that to kind of funnel insects and prey into their mouths. So say a bird trapped an insect in its bill, it started to get away somehow, those rictal bristles would kind of keep it in the area and make it easier to retrap it. But there was a study in 1980 by Conover and Miller that proved that wrong, because birds that didn't have the rictal bristles or had them taped, they were still really adept at catching insects. But what they did notice was a lot of insects parts and guts wound up in the bird's eyes. So it's undoubtedly that these rictal bristles are protection for the bird's eyes, and that makes a lot of sense. But even more interesting is that in some species, these can also be mechanoreceptors. So they can act like mammal whiskers to sense vibrations, sense stuff going on in the environment. And this is still an active field of research. Not too much is known about it, and there is a lot more to be done with it. But I am going to talk a little bit about that because it's super cool. And here's another side view of the phoebe. As far as flycatchers go, we're not sure if they're used as mechanoreceptors, but in certain species they are. I did want to show you an eastern kingbird, what a flycatcher does and why it may need these rictal bristles to protect its eyes. So this bird looking around for insects, and it found one. So, a cool thing that I've mentioned before in a lot of talks, you watch flycatchers, especially eastern phoebes, and you kind of take a seat and sit down where they're hunting, you can hear their bill snap when they catch a fly. It's one of my favorite things to do during migration. So that's definitely something to watch out for. And flycatchers are not the only ones that have rictal bristles. Some warblers do. When you think of an American redstart, which is this species, think of how they forage. American redstarts forage a lot very low. They sally out to catch flies. Sometimes they're on lawns and they're just jumping up, hopping to catch insects that are welling up from the lawn. So they are fly catching, even though they aren't a flycatcher technically. So these rictal bristles really help them. Okay, but not all warblers forage like that. So this yellow warbler, why don't I have any? So do they have any? You look at a yellow warbler, no rictal bristles. And if you think about the way yellow warblers forage and what their habitat is, it's more in trees. And they're gleaning insects, caterpillars from the undersides of leaves, from branches. You don't often see them on the ground. You know, all birds break the rules, so I'm not going to say they're never down there. But this is obviously an adaptation for birds that catch flies. They're, aerial hunters, and it helps with that. So an interesting look is this American crow. When you see their rictal bristles, they lay over the base of their bill. And this is one of my favorite photos. I want to turn this into a t-shirt at some point. But you can really see the rictal bristles are on the top of the bill there at the base. And they're flush against the bill. They don't really stick out. And there aren't studies I have found that analyze what these exactly are used for. But if they did have a way to detect something in the environment and they had nerve endings like they do in some birds, you could kind of imagine that this is an American crow, right? And it's got a rat. And a lot of times when they get these mammals are alive. You see the bird is already protecting itself by putting its nictitating membrane over its eye so that its eye doesn't get poked out. But I'm just kind of thinking that the rictal bristles, I don't know, but if they did have mechanoreceptors, they could also detect movement of this rat and further protect this bird from getting its eyes poked out through the nictitating membrane. It's a possibility. So definitely something to think about. And I'm sure more studies are going to be coming on the rictal bristles. But one of the coolest studies was done by Delaunay et al., and it was on the order of nightjars. And at the time, this Australian owlet nightjar was considered a nightjar. Now it's not. It's in its own order. But basically, this study looked at about a dozen or so species of nightjars that had these long rictal bristles. Now, the interesting thing was they did find that there were some of these rictal bristles were innervated in species that hunted at night. So the nocturnal species like this owl at night jar, but there were a couple of diurnal species that hunted during the day and they did not have innervated rictal bristles. So super cool study. I have it in the selected sources at the end, and we are recording this presentation, so you could take a look if you want to. And the cool thing about that study is it has photos of the actual rictal bristles, which I couldn't share due to copyright, but seriously, it's like really cool. I wanted to share it so bad. It's really neat to see. So definitely check it out. I mean, this bird looks like almost like a mammal, right? But it's a bird. Um, so communication is another function of feathers. And as we saw with my last talk on color, color is a big way to communicate in courtship and to attract mates and things like that. But just feathers themselves and the way feathers are held or arranged can also attract a mate. So here's a cool snowy egret with those yellow feet. And these birds actually use some specialized modified contour feathers, these contour feathers, to attract mates. So this is a male snowy egret. And believe it or not, those long plumes, which are called aigrettes, which is basically means heron or heron feathers in French. And they're specialized contour feathers that come out that are grown during the breeding season. And these birds put out those feathers and then they kind of retract their head and push it out and make a squawking sound. And if they're successful with this, they will attract a mate and they might have a little egret family. And I'm sure you want to see the result of that, right? So there were four babies in that nest, four little chicks, and all of that sound you were hearing was not just those four young. So that video I took at the St. Augustine Alligator Farm, which is a kind of a zoo, right? But the thing is, a lot of wild birds like the snowy egret, roseate spoonbills, wood storks, herons, they nest there because there's no threat of mammals invading their nests because there are alligators on the ground. So I would highly recommend going there. So in that video, you're hearing dozens, hundreds of young making noise, and they're super close. It's a really great place to see. And St. Augustine is a cool town all around anyway. Another modified or specialized contour feather are these occipital plumes of the black-crowned night heron, or they're called nuptial plumes. Both males and females have them. Usually you'll see two. There can be up to five. And something I have never seen, but that does happen when they're engaged in courtship, is they raise these feathers as they face each other, these occipital plumes. So definitely another thing to watch out for with those black-crowned night herons. Now, double-crested cormorants, if you live along the coast or you travel along the coast, you've probably seen these birds and wondered, why in the world are they called double-crested cormorants? Where are those crests? Well, during spring, which is coming up soon, I hope, you will have a chance to see these really cool crests. And they are really crests. They're almost like long eyebrows. And you'll see what I mean here with this double-crested cormorant head on view. The males and females both have these in spring. The males are longer. And sometimes they're only around for a month, the chance to see these. So definitely start checking out the cormorants around May and June and see with your binoculars if you can get a really good look at some of these awesome, once again, modified contour feathers. Pretty cool looking. Now, speaking of crests, not double crests, but just single crests, we know a lot of birds with crests. We know the northern cardinal, blue jay, cedar waxwings. A lot of birds have these really cool crests. Now, they can actually move those crests. They can raise them and lower them voluntarily. And it turns out that if it's raised, their crest, it means that they might kind of be agitated or in somewhat of a bad mood. So you've got this blue jay that I photographed, and it was really happy. It had an acorn. It wasn't breeding season. I wasn't bothering it at all. This one, it looks like it's like get away. It's a little worried. But then this one, whoa, look at that crest. It's totally raised, maybe as high as it can go. And it's not surprising, right? Because this bird is in the process of building a nest. It doesn't want me around. It doesn't want me to know where the nest is. So this kind of falls right in line with whether that bird is agitated or not. And I had to show a photo of a white-throated magpie jay in Oaxaca, Mexico. So flight control is another way birds use feathers in a really cool way. There's something called an alula, and the alula is this little part on the bird's wing where the wing has a bend in it. You'll see this little section. And it's basically, a lot of times it's called the thumb of the bird, and it's a section of 3 to 5 feathers that increase lift and prevent stalling. So you'll see with this red-tailed hawk, this was hovering, and when they slow down, they start to stall and they could drop. They need a little more lift. So by employing, which they can do, they employ these alulas. It creates a slot where air passes through, and it distributes the air over the wing so that they maintain their lift. Now, how many people have ever looked outside the window of a plane and seen these leading edge slats? This is the same idea. Now, the thing is, though, the planes use it on takeoff and landing. Birds usually only use it when they're hovering or on landing. And guess why? Because birds have a running start. They can flap their wings when they start to fly and take off, so they don't need it then, but planes can't do that. So that's what that's about. It's going to help with lift. I was curious if I could see the alula on the black-crowned night heron. And yeah, when I had a picture of it landing, and here it is, it's a little dark, but you could see it there, and also the one on the other side. So you can look for this in birds. It's much easier to see on raptors and larger birds than on small birds, but small birds use it too. So while we're on the topic of flight, there's another type of feather called a phyloplume that is really interesting. And there was a recent article on, I work at Cornell Lab, and Dr. Vanya Rower, who's the curator of birds and mammals at Cornell University Museum of Vertebrates, was featured in the New York Times, and he studies these feathers called phyloplumes. And you can't really see them, but we know they're working. But basically, they're tiny feathers that sit alongside some of the other feathers. And they're basically looking like this. This is a phyloplume. And they're used for flight monitoring. They do have nerve endings or innervated feathers, much like the rictal bristles. And these help the bird not only detect air pressure, wind speed and direction, but it also helps with plumage positioning and condition. They may even be able to detect, oh, I'm missing a feather there, or my feather is not in good condition, or something's wrong with it. And we're not exactly sure how they translate that information into what they need to do or how that all works. That's still an exciting active area of research. But one thing we do know is that these nerve endings are called Herbst corpuscles that are located a lot of times at the hair follicle, also in the joints and in the skin. And that's what kind of transmits this information. I actually found a photo of Herbst corpuscles and Grandry corpuscles. Herbst are basically used to detect vibration, and then Grandry are to detect light touch. The Grandries are mostly in ducks and duck bills. Now, another really cool function also related to flight is noise canceling technology built into wings. So owls are large birds. They hunt small mammals at night. So you can imagine if they're flying and if their wings make a big swooshing noise, they're going to scare away a lot of prey. So they have an adaptation of fringed wings. And a lot of these owls are very, very quiet, and especially the barn owl is known for having almost silent or near silent flight. And this is a result of fringed feathers. So you see the hawk feather on the right, and the owl feather has this fringe which breaks up the way the air attacks the feather, and it mutes the sound. So that's how they're able to go ahead and hunt. Here's a great horned owl feather, same type of thing with fringe. Now, speaking of feathers and noise canceling, there are feathers that whistle, doves, and things like that make noise, and that's involuntary, but and it's really just a result of their feather shape. When they take off, there's more space between the feathers. But the American woodcock did evolve to actually make a noise when it is flying, doing its night flights to attract mates in nocturnal courting, and this is the sound of that. And I'm going to show a little video here of this bird foraging. Interestingly enough, you may have heard in my previous lectures that this American woodcock can detect vibrations beneath the soil when it puts its bill in there. And that is actually the result of Herbst corpuscles. So they can also be found in the bill. So I also want to touch on some wild and crazy feather functions before we go to questions. Singing with wings, you may have heard about this, but this is one of the most amazing things. So it's a club wing mannequin, and Charles Darwin had actually illustrated, I'm going to show you the next slide, the feathers, some of the feathers of these birds have really strange rachis formations. They're not straight, they're kind of curved, and he knew that that had something to do with the sound they make, but he wasn't sure how it worked. But Dr. Kimberly Bostwick did a paper and a study and discovered that these birds beat their wings together, and these modified wing feathers vibrate 100 times a second to produce this sound I'm going to play for you right now. And this sound, I can't even believe it, but I was at my friend Peter's in Ecuador, and I was able to record this sound. So here it is. And this is to attract a mate. So that's the male club wing mannequin playing a musical instrument, serenading female bird. And these are Charles Darwin's drawings of the ABC. You see the ABC, these are some of the wing feathers of the male club wing mannequin. And basically what it is, it's like a pick and a comb structure, and it employs stridulation like with a cricket. But this was the first time that this was noted in birds. And so basically it kind of moves that pick over the comb, and that's what produces the sound. And for comparison, the lower feathers are the female's feathers in the same location. So you see, this is just really for sexual selection for males to be able to really impress the females. Now, we've talked a lot about how feathers repel water and keep birds really dry, but there is a case of a type of bird that soaks up water with specially modified feathers that are coil shaped. And they nest far from water holes. They're in desert areas in Africa and other places, and they need to get water for their young. So what they do is they fly to the water holes, which can be anywhere from 5 to even 50 miles away, and they soak up water in their feathers through capillary action, and then they fly it back 2 tablespoons. That's it. And then when they get back, the chicks actually kind of squeeze the feathers, and they're able to extract the water from that. So this is a great picture that I found of Burchell's sand grouse, and you can see they're soaking up the water in the water hole there. So another amazing feather function, this may be the craziest, is climbing, right? How can birds climb with their wings? Well, this is a Huatzin, and this is in Peru. And these birds, when they're young, when the chicks are young, in order to help them get away from predators, they retain some claws on their wings. Not when they're adults, but when they're chicks only. And it's kind of weird, like, what are we looking at here? But I have arrows. This is a young chick. There's the wing on the right there, and the arrows point to claws that are grabbing onto a branch. Okay, that's the Huatzin. These claws will shrink and disappear, basically, and they're not present in the adults and definitely not used. another wild and crazy function that you might be able to witness. I'm not sure, but it happens with birds that we are familiar with and that are in our areas. Grebes. So we've got pied-billed grebe and horned grebe. These birds eat their own feathers and they feed feathers to their young. Why do they do that? They eat a lot of spiny aquatic insects and fish, and for them, this is a way to protect their digestive system, so that they have a bunch of feathers down there. When the fish and all these things come in, it liquefies, they digest it, and then the bones get trapped in the feathers and they regurgitate them, much very similar to owls. Um, Other birds that pluck their own feathers are some ducks. So common eiders do this. Also mallards. Mallards, which we're very familiar with. Like everybody knows a mallard duck with the male with the green head. So the females will pluck their feathers and line their nest with the feathers to make it nice and cozy for the young. But this also serves another function because when they're plucking their breast feathers, it's exposing the skin, which is going to enable them to have better contact with their eggs and incubate those eggs much more effectively. So it has a double function there. And here's a mallard's nest with an example. So before we go to questions, I do want to mention one more feather function to look out for, which is something I got to witness. It is the delta wing posture of the great blue heron. There is some dispute on the purpose of this. It probably has something to do with thermoregulation, either cooling or warming and or kind of sunning the feathers to get rid of parasites. But this was a very hot day, so I'm thinking this probably was to cool off, and I did get a little video of it. Okay, and here are selected sources. Like I said, this is recorded, so once this is posted, you can refer to some of these amazing studies. And definitely keep in touch. I'm at brooklynbridgebirds.com. All of my social media channels are on there. Definitely, it's migration is coming up, so definitely find more birds for yourself or your family or friends through Aesop's Fable or your favorite bookstore, or check it out from the library. And I'm going to hand it over to Mina now for some questions.
Hi, I put on a headset, so let me know if you're hearing me okay and if you're getting
Yes.
that. You are, okay. Because we were getting a little bit of an echo before, so I wanted to try something different. Okay, so I'm going to open up the chat so you all can chat with each other. But if you could, please put your questions in the Q&A because sometimes the chat goes by too quickly for me to follow all the questions. Heather, I can't believe evolution works the way that it does.
I know, it's amazing.
Like, what kind of, like, how did it happen that birds decided they were going to eat their own feathers? I mean, it would be like me, like eating my own skin.
Right, and it's so crazy that it's so different among species. I mean, many birds could eat their own feathers and do the same thing, but they're not. So it's really fascinating how different it is among species.
Yeah, I mean, all of the evolutionary things that they do to survive is just amazing to me. Okay, so I'm going to start with some questions. Jennifer says, our woodpecker seems to use its tail while on the feeder and it seems to cup under or push against the feeder while it eats. Is this a stabilizing action?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean they definitely use them on feeders as well. That's a great point. I didn't think of that. Yes.
Yeah. Um, let's see. How, if at all, will the lunar eclipse affect the birds early this in the morning?
Oh,
Like
I'm so
the
glad you mentioned the lunar eclipse because yeah, don't try not to miss it. It's going to be, I think it's starting at 3:44 a.m. and then around 6 a.m. it's going to peak, but that's when sunrise happens, so we're not sure how visible, how it's going to look.
Mhm.
But how is I? That's a good question. I am not sure. Really, the sun is going to be rising, so I assume that the birds are going to do their normal thing. The moon's going to be a little bit reddish, so. Uh, I don't think it will affect their normal movements and what they do. But with a solar eclipse, it definitely does because especially if you have totality, they think it's nighttime, and then when it moves over, they think it's that the sun is coming up. So it's very disorienting, and you do see some differences, like birds calming down when it gets dark in a solar eclipse.
Hmm. You'd think like, oh, I mean, the eclipses don't happen that often in time, like over time, but you'd think like they'd have some use, gotten used to it, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, Other than herons, what other birds utilize a powder down? Do
Yeah.
cormorants have it?
But so other than herons, we got the pigeons and doves and the parrots, and also I believe bustards and tinamous also use powder down.
And how do birds stay warm in the winter? Will they use sand baths instead of water baths?
Um, oh no, so sand baths, that's a great question. So certain species take sand baths or dust baths. But the ducks will take baths in the water. And they basically, like, if it's freezing water or like the water is frozen, they obviously can't deal with that. But if it's water that's liquid, they will still take a bath. And yeah, I mean, they still need to get water and maintain their feathers. You're not going to have species that normally don't take dust baths doing that uh, just because it's cold.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And do female blue jays have more muted feathers, or do they look identical to male blue jays?
Oh, I that's a good question. I'm pretty sure that they look identical. I'm not totally sure. They're both, I mean, they're both very they have the patterning on the back, that kind of checker pattern. But I've seen some pretty muted looking blue jays. But the blue jays, they don't have those iridescent feathers like a lot of the ones we talked about last time. So I think that they look very similar.
Um, little ch Slight change of topic. When you showed the egret, heron, stork, it reminded me to ask, why does a male at times throw out of the nest, usually the runt of the brood?
Oh, so herons sometimes do that and other species do that. I really, yeah. So unfortunately, some of these birds will get rid of some of their young, and really it's often a matter of resources. So they know that they can't provide enough food for the whole brood, so they need to get rid of one of them, unfortunately, or multiple. Coots do this too. Coots will often drown their young, which sounds horrifying, but kind of the same reason. They for reproductive success, it's better to have a couple or three successful um, fledges rather than none by distributing too little food across the brood.
Sad. How do Oropendolas, I know I'm saying that wrong,
Or
make
a
their
pendula, or a pendula.
Oropendola make their dripping sound?
Wow, I have no idea. But oropendulas are really cool. They're like, I've seen them in South America. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'm not sure how they do that.
Um, how do you come across how do you come across these feathers and functions from close observation or familiarity with research or both?
Both. So I did a lot of research for this presentation. And what's
Mhm.
really exciting is, like I said, a lot of it's on the cutting edge, new with like the Rictal bristles. So new studies are going to come out. But also being out in the field, like the Rictal bristles, I've definitely noticed, and the powder down, I noticed. So it's definitely a combination of both.
Mhm. Yeah, I have to say that Heather does like a deep dive into any topic that she talks about. Like I said, what did you spend 6 months on the last one about the colors?
I don't know that. Yeah, the feather color. I went a little deep on that. Was a little too much.
Yeah, so we try to stay in some sort of lane nowadays.
Right.
Um, okay, so can you explain the feather transformation on bald eagles' heads from adolescent to white? Why does it take 4 years?
Gosh, you're right. And this is similar to gulls, right? So, yeah, why does it take so long? I think it probably has something to do with maybe whether they're ready or not to breed, right? So like a juvenile bird, the plumage indicates to a potential mate that they're not the ideal choice for a mate. They're not fully matured. They're not ready for that. So I think it has to do with that definitely plays a role where whether these birds are ready to breed or not.
I just want to take a quick second to say a bunch of people have said how what an amazing presentation this. Gina is says this is the most amazing presentation on birds I've ever attended. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Gina.
Okay, so I'm going to go on, keep on going on with questions. Can you explain how male peacocks shimmer their tails, but the eye spots seem to stay fixed?
I knew this was going to happen. I knew I was going to be in over my head with these questions. I really don't know. And this is why, because we were leaving a lot of room for questions. I was a little worried. So I really don't, I do not know. But I mean, the thing about the peacock feathers that I can say is that was a runaway trait that we talked about last time, where it basically is not helping the bird survive when you talk about survival of the fittest. And that is sexual selection going haywire and really just taking off as a runaway trait to attract females.
And it always amazes me, Heather, that you might not know all the answers to all of the questions, but you always have something to add to the conversation about some aspect of the question. So I appreciate that.
So far, I have. We'll see what the next one brings.
Oh, I might have jinxed her. Sorry. So are there any other known birds that have claws on their wings? Wondering about any known links to dinosaurs.
I don't think so. That the only one I've come across is Watsine, and I would be willing to say that's the only one. But talking about dinosaurs, I think they did have claws on their wings. But something really cool about feathers and dinosaurs, keeping in line with it, I can elaborate on dinosaurs and the topic is that it was initially thought that dinosaur scales turned into feathers or evolved into feathers. But studies have shown that really wasn't the case. Basically, feathers might have been ornamental to attract mates and things like that, and they weren't originally for flight. But feathers actually didn't evolve from scales. They evolved from these little kind of spiky tubes that were on the dinosaur's skin, and that's where feathers came from, not scales.
Interesting.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have thought that it had come from scales anyways, because it just seems like such different things. But over a million billion years, I guess anything can happen.
Well, when you think of the layering, right? The layering of scales kind of seems similar to the layering of feathers. I guess that's where the idea came from.
Susan says, in response to the bald eagle thing, with younger eagles, the non-white head and tail lets adults in the territory know that they are still kids. That lets them eat inside an area that is owned by an adult pair. Oh, that's
Oh,
interesting.
thank you for that.
Yeah, I love how people like respond to questions.
Yes.
Okay, so let me keep going back because I want to make sure we get to as many questions as possible. Birds at my feeder wipe their beaks on a branch while eating. Is that their way of using napkins?
I think it is, yes. So they're basically cleaning off their bill. I love seeing that. That's another cool behavior. Even warblers, tiny birds do that all the time, and it's really cool. I mean, I guess it's kind of since they maybe if they don't have rictal bristles to protect their eyes or get rid of insect guts, maybe they have other ways they can deal with that. But definitely cleaning off their bill uh, is probably a great way to keep in tip-top shape.
Hmm. And I wonder if there's any birds that are particularly dainty about it.
Yeah, I they don't seem like it, right? Like even
Hey,
tiny birds, they're banging their bill across. It just looks pretty aggressive, but
mhm.
it's interesting.
Where does the powder come from? Is it in the skin?
So the powder, that's a great question. So the powder down, uh, it grows just like a regular feather from the skin, from feather follicles, but most all the other bird feathers we looked at, they molt like bird feathers. They molt either once a year or twice a year, and either they do a full and a partial molt, or they do two full molts a year, as is the case with the bobolink. See, different species have different schedules, but with the powder down, that doesn't molt. It just continuously grows. So they always have that resource to do their dry shampooing and dry conditioning.
And that's maybe where us humans got that idea. Do you think cormorants use their spread wing posture for the same reason as herons do. I've heard that they do it to dry their wings, which would imply they're not as water resistant as other seabirds.
Right. So they aren't, right? So the way their feather structure is, it's a little tighter structure and allows them to dive further because when you think about what they need to do to forage, they are basically diving underwater whereas herons are basically spearing fish. They're above the water and spearing fish. So they don't need to dive. So being not as waterproof allows the cormorants to dive and get their fish. But when they come up after they get their fish, yeah, they need to dry off. So that is exactly what they're doing. If you notice when they spread their wings out, their back is usually to the sun. And anhingas also do that. These birds are in the south and Florida and other places down there. Great question.
This is a comment that I think is really interesting. I have heated bird bath and they use it to drink and to bathe, especially robins. They love to bathe in it. One of the best ways to attract birds to your yard. But that does it matter hot, warm water, cool water, ice water?
I think yeah, warm water is going to be better, but not too hot. I don't know the ideal temperature, but I have read that if it's too hot, it's definitely not a good thing. So, but it sounds like it's your temperature is perfect and they're enjoying it. So that's definitely helping the birds.
I saw several mallards in Davis Square in Somerville. Why are they in the middle of an urban area? I thought bird flu?
Is there a pond nearby? Because any if there's a pond nearby or a lake,
Hmm,
uh the because even a lot of times I'll see mallards on the lawn in my patch in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And it does seem kind of weird, but there are water sources, fresh water sources nearby. So if there's a pond, I think that's probably the reason. But if not, yeah, that might be strange.
Yeah, I've been to Davis Square and it's very urban. I mean, lots of restaurants, lots of people, not a lot of green space. So,
No water sources, no.
not that I remember.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they seemed out of sorts and weren't walking properly or weren't really, you know, moving around, maybe they did have bird flu.
Maybe. Would a junco nest here, or was it a coincidence that I saw one near a nest?
Juncos? Oh wow. I'm not sure if Juncos nest up there. I think they do. Yeah, I really I'm not certain if they do, actually.
Hmm. Okay, so I'm seeing some comments about the water in Davis Square. They're really cool. Let's see, about there might be something about a mile away, and I saw two mallard pairs in Davis Square. They look to be foraging. Hmm, interesting. Um,
I mean, I wonder if they were gathering nesting material or something too.
Maybe, but a couple people said there is water close by,
Okay.
so that makes sense. Okay, obviously I don't have a great memory of Davis Square, so sorry.
No, but it's very strange when you see ducks just walking around, like, and you don't see water very close, even though it's there. But so I
hmm
get it. They look out of place for sure.
hmm Someone mentioned blue jay feathers. Are there any other birds whose feathers have colors due to the structure instead of pigment?
Yes, I mean a lot of the birds, basically the blue in the blue jays is the result of feather structure, but they don't have iridescence. So it doesn't the blue doesn't depend on the angle, but feather structure in certain birds, like hummingbirds, the gorget on their throat, the angle they turn and the way the light hits it, that's also a result of feather structure. So it's just a different way that the feather structures work to reflect light. And in the case of the melanin and the darker feathers, it's the light is fully absorbed there.
Wow. Our chickens have various patterns of molting. Do birds have different strategies for dealing with molting?
Definitely, right. So most birds go through two molts a year. They do a full molt to replace feathers, and then a partial molt to that happens before breeding season, where they can replace some feathers. A good example is the American goldfinch. The male has those black wings, right? But when it's getting ready for breeding season, it doesn't molt the black wings. It molts the other feathers around the face, the contour feathers, into a bright yellow for breeding season. So that's the case with them. There are other birds that do 2 full molts a year. That's the bobolink that I mentioned. And then other birds, I think, only molt once a year. Yes.
Are the bristles on woodpeckers rictal bristles?
Great question. So those are called nasal tufts, and they don't function the same way as rictal bristles. They're more to cover the nose and protect the nose, and they're basically contour feathers.
Okay. Speaking of bald eagles, why is their admittedly underwhelming call dubbed by the call of a red-tailed hawk? Is it just Hollywood?
Yes, that happens all the time. So the red-tailed hawk has kind of a screech, like I can't imitate it, but it seems ominous. But the thing is, the bald eagle has a call that's kind of it's more dainty. Same thing with osprey, very dainty calls. So that's why they want the fierce call of the red-tailed hawk to be used with the bald eagle to make it look fiercer or sound fiercer.
Um, Pigeons in the cities have an unfortunate reputation for being dirty. Is there anything that helps them stay cleaner? Or is it even true? Are they dirty?
They're really not dirty. I mean, there is a lot of excrement from pigeons, and I think that's how they get that reputation because they roost on ledges, they roost on light posts, and they kind of stay in one place a lot. They're not, migrating through. So these areas do become dirty, but inherently they are not dirty. And as we talked about, they have that built-in feather maintenance system that helps them to stay clean and take care of their feathers, which is the powder down.
Mhm. For immature mute swans, do the nature of the feathers change in type, or is it only by color as it gets from gray to white when they age?
Does the nature of the feathers change? So with the young birds, they're more, yeah, the like down feathers, and then they don't yet have those pennaceous feathers that zip together. So that's definitely going to come in with age. But other than that, I don't know the specifics of that.
Mhm. How do birds with disproportionately long tails manage stability while flying, especially in strong winds? Are they at higher risk for predation?
Oh my gosh, yeah, they definitely are. Right. Some of these birds, like the quetzal, right? The resplendent quetzal in Costa Rica,
Mhm.
which is another type of a runaway trait where it's really about sexual selection and attracting mates. It definitely makes them more susceptible to predators. One thing I'm not sure of is if a bird like the resplendent quetzal can do fright molt, because that would, and how long it would take that feather to grow back, I don't know. But yes, to answer your question, it definitely makes them more susceptible to predators.
Mhm. And I'm wondering if the prolonged cold in Brooklyn caused bird deaths.
Yes, it definitely did. I saw some waterfowl and some geese that had died. I mean, and really, the a lot of the songbirds that pass away you don't see because they're small. But this happens when a lot of these birds. My favorite habitat is leaf litter because it's easy to see the birds on the ground. And obviously, when it snows, all of that leaf litter, which it just has so much food for a lot of the birds, including white-throated sparrows and robins and all these when they can't get to that, obviously they have to switch, to eating from seed heads or things like that, which white-throated sparrows can do. But something like the American woodcock, it really has to dig into the mud and get these earthworms. So a lot of them, unfortunately, pass away when the ground is completely covered in snow.
Mhm. And one last comment about uh, the lunar eclipse. Google says that the National Audubon Society says during the lunar eclipse, birds may become confused. Nocturnal birds may increase activity while others may experience disruptions in foraging and communication. Lack of moonlight can cause certain species to change their flight attitude, attitude or altitude. my glasses are like dirty, and behavior. And some birds may increase their vocalization. I mean, I would imagine like something, like humans back in the day would be like, oh my God, there's no light.
Well, yeah, now that you bring that up, that thanks for looking that up. And it's making me think that during migration, a lot of birds use the stars and the moon as ways to navigate. So yeah, I can imagine, especially during migration, that would probably really affect them, and probably tonight it will as well. So thank you for sharing that information.
It was altitude, not attitude.
Yeah, it
Which
was. It was altitude.
totally makes more sense than what I read. Okay, I'm going to get to these last two questions and then I have a couple of things to say. Growing up, I was told to never pick up feathers on the ground because the bird might have been sick if they were losing feathers. Wondering if there's truth to that.
Um, it could be. It's anytime you do pick up a bird, you definitely want to wash your hands when you get home. But really, it's actually you're not supposed to pick up feathers or birds by federal law, and you shouldn't take feathers home or anything like that per federal laws.
Interesting too. I had no idea. Now, you're probably saving a life as well as keeping us out of jail, Heather. Thank you. Um, and did birds of paradise evolve because their relative isolation allowed them leeway to not develop camouflage?
I I'm not certain, but that sounds like a great theory. I mean, it really does, right? Because if you don't have predators around, you can really experiment, and you can, oh, I could see how a lot of these traits, runaway traits, might develop in those cases. And then, as other people mentioned, they could become something that affects their survival if predators are introduced to the area.
Right. Okay, so the things I wanted to say, first of all, Heather, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Obviously, people have loved it and we've learned a lot, as always. But also, Heather's going to be back with us in September to talk about migration. Everybody wants to know about migration at that time as we see all the birds going past our windows. So I will put a link to that in the recap email that goes out later today. And also, I wanted to say that I am working on Heather to come up here in person. Who knows when that will be? Who knows? But if she does, I will let you all know so you all can join us for something fun in Ashland. Because Heather and I always have fun when we're together.
You do. I love that idea. And thank you so much, Mina, for inviting me again to speak. And for everyone that was here tonight, thank you for being here. Thanks for the awesome questions. And migration's coming soon. So definitely have a very happy spring migration.
Fabulous. All right, everybody, have a wonderful night. Happy birding.
Happy birding. Bye.